The story of the Roman Empire begins in a small city on the banks of the Tiber River in central Italy. According to legend, Rome was founded in 753 BC by two brothers, Romulus and Remus, raised by a she-wolf after being abandoned as infants. While the myth became a symbol of Roman identity, the real rise of Rome was built not on legends, but on discipline, military strength, political strategy, and an unstoppable desire for expansion. Over centuries, this small settlement transformed into one of the greatest empires the world had ever seen, controlling territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. At its peak, the Roman Empire ruled over nearly 70 million people, connected by roads, trade routes, and a powerful army that stretched across 3 continents. But despite its immense power, Rome would eventually collapse under the weight of its own ambition. This is the story of how the Roman Empire rose to dominate the ancient world, and how that superpower slowly fell apart. In its early years, Rome was ruled by kings, but around 509 BC, the Romans overthrew their monarchy and created a republic. Power was divided between elected officials and the Senate, a political institution dominated by wealthy aristocrats. The Roman Republic valued military service, loyalty to the state, and strict social order. Through a series of wars and alliances, Rome gradually expanded across the Italian peninsula. But Rome's true transformation into a superpower began with the Punic Wars against Carthage, a wealthy North African civilization located in present-day Tunisia. The most famous Carthaginian general, Hannibal, shocked the Romans by leading his army and war elephants across the Alps into Italy. For years, Rome faced devastating defeats, yet it refused to surrender. Eventually, Rome rebuilt its armies, invaded North Africa, and defeated Carthage completely in 146 BC. Carthage was destroyed, and Rome emerged as the dominant force in the Mediterranean world. As Rome expanded, it gained enormous wealth, but success also created deep problems. Conquered territories brought slaves, riches, and political corruption. Wealthy elites became richer, while ordinary citizens struggled with poverty and unemployment. Political violence increased, and ambitious generals began using armies to gain personal power. One of the most famous of these generals was Julius Caesar. A brilliant military commander, Caesar conquered Gaul, which is modern-day France, greatly expanding Roman territory. His victories made him extremely popular with the people and feared by the Senate. In 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his army, an act considered a declaration of war against the Republic. Civil war followed, and Caesar emerged victorious. He declared himself dictator for life, effectively ending the Roman Republic. But many senators feared he wanted to become king. On March 15, 44 BC, known as the Ides of March, Julius Caesar was assassinated inside the Senate by a group of conspirators led by Brutus and Cassius. The murder shocked Rome, but instead of restoring the Republic, it pushed the state deeper into chaos. After Caesar's death, another civil war erupted. Eventually, Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, defeated his rivals and became the sole ruler of Rome. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him the title Augustus, marking the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus became Rome's first emperor and brought stability after decades of war. Under his rule, the empire entered a golden age known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, which lasted for nearly 2 centuries. During this period, Rome built roads, aqueducts, temples, theaters, and massive engineering projects that still inspire the world today. Roman law became more organized, trade flourished across the Mediterranean, and cities expanded rapidly. The Roman army secured borders stretching from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south. Rome itself became a city of grand architecture. including the Colosseum, where gladiators fought before huge crowds, and vast public baths that reflected the empire's wealth and sophistication. But behind the glory of Rome, cracks were beginning to appear. The empire was simply too large to manage effectively. Communication across vast distances was slow, and defending long borders became increasingly difficult. Emperors often came to power through violence, assassination, or military coups. Political instability weakened the government, while economic troubles grew worse. Heavy taxes burdened citizens, inflation damaged the economy, and dependence on slave labor slowed innovation. Roman law became more organized, trade flourished across the Mediterranean, and cities expanded rapidly. The Roman army secured borders stretching from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south. Rome itself became a city of grand architecture, including the Colosseum, where gladiators fought before huge crowds, and vast public baths that reflected the empire's wealth and sophistication. But behind the glory of Rome, cracks were beginning to appear. The empire was simply too large to manage effectively. Communication across vast distances was slow, and defending long borders became increasingly difficult. Emperors often came to power through violence, assassination, or military coups. Political instability weakened the government, while economic troubles grew worse. Heavy taxes burdened citizens, inflation damaged the economy, and dependence on slave labor slowed innovation. At the same time, the Roman army began changing. Many soldiers were no longer loyal to Rome itself, but to individual commanders who promised money and rewards. Corruption spread through the government, and internal divisions weakened the empire from within. During the 3rd century AD, Rome entered one of the most dangerous periods in its history, known as the Crisis of the 3rd century. Emperors rose and fell rapidly, often murdered within months of taking power. Civil wars erupted across the empire, while foreign enemies attacked weakened borders. Germanic tribes invaded from the north, while the Persian Empire threatened Rome from the east. Entire regions broke away from Roman control. For a time, it seemed the empire might completely collapse. However, Emperor Diocletian attempted major reforms in the late 3rd century. He divided the empire into eastern and western halves to improve administration and strengthen the military. Later, Emperor Constantine made another historic decision by embracing Christianity. In 313 AD, Constantine legalized Christianity, ending centuries of persecution against Christians within the empire. He also founded a new eastern capital, Constantinople, built on the site of modern-day Istanbul. This city would later become one of the most powerful centers in the world. Although reforms temporarily stabilized Rome, the western half of the empire continued to weaken. Economic decline, political corruption, and military pressures became impossible to control. At the same time, massive migrations of barbarian tribes moved toward Roman territories. Some groups sought safety from the Huns, fierce nomadic warriors from Central Asia, whose invasions pushed entire populations westward. Rome increasingly relied on barbarian mercenaries within its own army, a risky strategy that weakened loyalty and discipline. In 410 AD, the city of Rome itself was sacked by the Visigoths under King Alaric. For the first time in nearly 800 years, the Eternal City had fallen to a foreign enemy. The psychological shock was enormous. Although the empire survived temporarily, its authority was shattered. Over the following decades, invasions intensified. Vandals crossed into North Africa and captured key territories that supplied Rome with grain and wealth. In 455 AD, the Vandals even sacked the city of Rome again, carrying away treasures and destroying parts of the city. Meanwhile, Roman emperors became little more than powerless figures controlled by military leaders. Finally, in 476 AD, a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer removed the last Western Roman emperor, a young ruler called Romulus Augustulus. Historians traditionally mark this event as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The once mighty empire that had ruled much of the known world for centuries had collapsed. Yet the story of Rome did not completely end. The Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, survived for nearly another 1,000 years from its capital in Constantinople. Roman law, engineering, language, architecture, and military traditions continued shaping civilizations long after the fall of the West. Latin evolved into modern languages such as Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian. Roman roads influenced transportation systems, and Roman legal ideas became foundations for many modern governments. Even today, the influence of Rome can be seen in politics, architecture, religion, and culture across the world. The fall of the Roman Empire remains one of history's greatest lessons. Rome was not destroyed by a single battle or one enemy alone. It collapsed slowly through a combination of political corruption, economic decline, military weakness, internal conflict, and external invasions. The empire that once seemed invincible ultimately became too vast, too divided, and too unstable to survive. But despite its fall, Rome's legacy endured. Its rise demonstrated the incredible power of organization, ambition, and innovation, while its collapse revealed how even the greatest superpowers can crumble from within. More than 1,500 years later, the story of Rome still fascinates humanity because it reflects a timeless truth. No empire, no matter how powerful, lasts forever.